Well, good morning, everyone. It's Chasing the Wind, this new series, just today and then also next week, 2 weeks, on a topic that I believe is absolutely vital for every one of us. What I'm getting ready to talk about is something that I have a personal issue with, and it's something that you have a personal issue with. Every one of us are going to draw from this. And what I want to tell you is that many times we'll walk into services like this and we allow this to become routine. Guys, this can never become routine. But this has to be a time that we come with an anticipation of saying, God, I'm walking into this place, and I'm getting ready to enter into a worship experience and then a teaching that can change my life. And so every week it's this mentality that whenever the Word of God is presented, that I sit on the edge of my seat and I will receive everything possible that I can, because today is the opportunity of improving my life and my future. And so I want to talk about a very, very important subject this morning. Before I jump into that, Kay and I were out of town last week. Pastor Adam, our children's pastor, preached. Heard that he did an amazing job. Did you guys enjoy Adam? You know, he is a character. He is funny. He is great. And I want to tell you, he does an amazing job with all of our kids. And so to Adam, thank you very, very much for last week. Then also, I want to take just a moment to tell you that I'm extremely excited about our women's conference that is coming up. And the reason why is because it's one of the greatest conferences that we have ever put together. The amount of energy, the amount of time that we've put into this is outrageous. And guys, I want you to know this from me today, that the speakers that we are bringing in are world-class speakers. And I don't say that lightly. And the reason why that I say that is because some of these speakers that we're bringing in are the headline speakers at Hillsong in Australia, that many people will spend thousands and thousands of dollars of going to that conference, and we have it right here in our backyard. And so I want to tell you that don't miss this conference, ladies. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal. Also, this is unheard of. This conference is only $35. And I can tell you it does not come close to meeting the budget. But we wanted to get this cost down as far as we possibly can, that no one would be eliminated from this conference. And we want you to join with 1,000 other ladies in this auditorium for that weekend for one of the greatest spiritual experiences of your life. And so invite people. This is a conference that you can invite unchurched people. And I want to tell you, they will be blown away by the level of ministry that will come forth from this stage. And also I want to tell you this, you know, that one of our driving forces at Copper Pointe is reaching a young generation. And it'll always be a part of who we are. But every week, you know, we're going into the high schools, and they're reaching high school students that are unchurched. They're reaching students, their parents never darken the door of a church. They have no idea what church is like until they walk into this place. And we have identified 150 young girls that need help to come to this conference. Many of them are from poor families. Others of them are from families that see no benefit in church and would not give their students $35 to come to this. And so what I'm asking you to do is to step out this morning. When you go out of the atrium, there's a table set out right in front. And if you can sponsor one of these girls, I want to tell you it's life-changing. And maybe you're here and you have the means, and that you're able to maybe take a block and say that I want to sponsor this many girls. Maybe you don't have those means, and this is not a great time financially for you. Maybe you can go out and say, you know, I'd like to pay for a portion, or I'd like to pay for a half of a scholarship, and we want to be able to get all 150 of these girls paid for and get them here. And this is the reason why. Because I know out of all of the years of ministry, I've seen this over and over and over again, that their testimony one day will be that someone paid my way, and I came to a conference called the Happy Conference, and that it's where I met God, and I invited Jesus Christ into my life. It's the place that I received the calling of God on my life. It was the turning point. And I can tell you that you cannot invest your money in any better way than investing it in people that are in need. And we believe in reaching the young generation. We believe in making a major impact in our city. This is one of the ways of doing that. So when you're leaving today, keep that in mind. And as we rally together, work together, generous together, we can make a huge, huge difference. chasing the wind. There was a man who stepped out on the curb of the street, saw a cab passing by, and he waved the cab down, and the cab driver pulled up to the curb, and the man jumped into the back seat. The cab driver said, "Wow, that was great timing." He said, "Most people wait a long time to catch a cab. You just walked out and waved me down, and how lucky are you? You know, you're just like Dave." Well, the man in the back seat said, "Well, who's Dave?" "Who's Dave?" "Dave Anderson. Dave Anderson is the luckiest and the most successful man that you could ever meet in your life." I mean, Dave Anderson, there is nothing that ever goes wrong in his life. Dave Anderson does everything perfect in his life. Well, the man in the back seat said, "Well, I'm sure he's a great man, but everybody has a cloud over their life from time to time." "Oh, no, not Dave. I'm telling you, Dave has never had a dark day in his life. Everything works just right for Dave." Let me tell you, when he was in college, he was the number one athlete. Dave, he is a public speaker that goes beyond anyone else. I mean, he's better than anybody that you could ever hear. I'm telling you that Dave can sing like an opera baritone. Dave can dance like a Broadway star. There is nothing that Dave can't do. Let me tell you a little more about Dave. Dave has a memory that he will remember every face and every name of every person he ever meets. Dave is amazing. I mean, he can remember birth dates and anniversaries and every special day. And let me tell you what else Dave can do. At home, if anything is broken, Dave can fix it. There is nothing Dave can't fix at the house. And the man in the back seat said, "Wow, man, it must be nice to have a friend like that." And the cab driver said, "Well, actually, I've never met Dave." And he said, "Well, then how in the world do you know so much about Dave?" He said, "Well, I married his widow." Now, that'll take some of you a little while, all right? Maybe as you're driving home, you'll get that. But you know, have you ever felt like you've just lived in somebody's shadow? Have you ever really thought that as you look around that you just don't really measure up to the people on each side of you? You know, we get wrapped up and we're constantly looking to our left and looking to our right to see, how do I measure up? I mean, look at how great they are, and look what they're doing, and look what a great athlete they are, and look how good they are at business. And we're constantly looking to our left and looking to our right, and we're measuring, and we're trying to decide, am I okay by how we analyze ourselves up against others? What that creates is living in the land of Ur. You see, we live in the land of Ur because when you take a look at this list, you know, what we find all around us is that there are people that are richer and skinnier and smaller and taller, prettier, happier, hipper, or talented-er than you. And we want the Ur that they have. You know, I don't have as much as they have, and I want more and then we become frustrated, and it's like, you know, I just want more in my life, and I want what they have. You know, then we start dating, and we get married, and everything is great, and everything is good for a time. Because after a while, we start looking to our left and looking to our right, and we start looking at other husbands and other wives and what they have, and then we fall back into this land of Ur, and we're looking at our spouse, and we're thinking, you know, why can't you be richer? Why can't you be prettier or smaller or more muscular or more fitter? You know, all you need is a little more you know, I mean, come on. I mean, you need a little less there and maybe a little more there. You know, I mean, come on. We just want that you know, that other people have, and we become disappointed with what we have. Then we start having kids. Kids come along, and then we start looking at everybody else's families and what they're doing and what their kids are doing. And I mean, they got their kids in the private school. God, look at what they're already reading. I mean, their kids seem to be more advanced than our kids, and their kids are in gifted classes. Wow, in high school, how did their kid already move up to varsity and our kid wasn't moved up? Our kid is as good as their kid, and we start this comparison game. And when you start comparing yourself to the lives of other people, it's like chasing the wind. On a windy day, have you ever gone outside and the trees are blowing and you can see the effects of the wind, and you go out and you try to grab a hold of the wind? Have you ever done that? You grab a hold, and yet there's nothing to grab a hold of. It just goes through your hands and through your fingers. Maybe we could take a bucket, and on a real windy day that we could take a bucket and a lid, and we jump out in the wind and we try to box up a barrel of wind. And yes, it's impossible to do so. Because where does wind come from? And where does wind go? We're putting pressure on people around us. Because really, if my spouse had a little more I'd be a lot happier. If my kids had a little more in their life, if they would be a little faster on the team, if they'd be a little bit stronger, then I'd feel better about myself as a parent. Wow, do you ever feel like you're in competition with perfect families? Well, when you look at a distance, there are so many people, and just like in here, so many little family units, and when you look at you from a distance, it looks like you're the perfect little family. You're perfect. You got perfect marriage. You got perfect kids. And God, when we see someone like that, it's like, I just wish they'd mess up somewhere. They're just too perfect. Why can't they be like everybody else? And we kind of just wish that something would happen. Have you ever been at a high school basketball game and your son or your daughter's playing? Well, they're really not playing because they're sitting on the bench. But there's a starting five out there, and your child's sitting on the bench. People sitting next to you on the stands. Well, their student, he's the star of the team, and they're standing and screaming and shouting, and yet you find that there's not a lot to shout about. And then that thought you would never verbalize, but as their kid's running down the court, come on, can't he just stumble and stump his toe and get turf toe? Come on. Could he just twist his ankle? I don't want him to break anything, but if he just twisted his ankle and he'd have to hobble off and go sit on the bench, my son could go in and then he could really show them what he could do. Envy. We're coveting what they have. And when we can't get what they have, we develop a dislike for them. Have you ever noticed how we do that? Oh, we don't want to admit it. Oh, we want to push that out and say, not me. I would never do that. No, we've all done that. I've done that and you've done that. And why is it that we create a dislike for certain people? And it's because we're living in the land of Ur and we've got our eyes on them. And again, what we see is that they're richer and skinnier and smarter and prettier and happier than what we are. And all this all starts when we're very, very young. Because you can go all the way back to middle school or high school. And a girl who may not feel all that good about herself, and she walks into the cafeteria, and then on the other side, she sees all of those skinny, blonde, bubblehead cheerleaders, and I just don't like them. You may be on the basketball team and you're struggling, and you walk into the cafeteria and there's the starting five sitting at the table, and as you walk by, you just think, I really hate those guys. I really hate them. Or maybe it's even as an adult that we're at the office and it's that one guy that gets the promotion time after time after time. And you look at him and you just think, I really don't like this guy. Then what about that couple that walks into church every week? Never have met them, but I see them every week. I don't even know what their name is, but I refer to them as Ken and Barbie. You know who they are. I mean, they walk in, their hair is perfect, all their clothes are perfect, and they come strutting in. It's like, who do you think you are? I've never met them, but I really don't care to even talk to them. I don't like them. And then you've got those soccer moms. You know exactly who they are. I mean, they pull up to the park and they have that Land Rover that they get out of, and their kids are all dressed just right. They take off running through the park, and then she gets out with her perfect husband, and I just don't like them. I mean, who do they think they are? Wow. As your wife nudges you in the ribs, did you see that ring she's wearing? Did you see that? Did you see what he bought her? When we went over to their house, and they got this ginormous house, and we walk in the front door, and oh my word, they've got 16-foot ceilings. We go back to our house, 8-foot ceilings, feel like you're having a duck to walk through your house. And we were happy with that until we saw what they have. And we are frustrated because we are looking to our left and to our right, and we're seeing what they have, and we believe that they're happier than we are because they have what we don't have, and somehow it creates this dislike. I don't like them. I don't know why, but I don't like them. It's not their fault. It's not their fault that they're richer. It's not their fault that they're smarter or they're more successful. Let me tell you what the real problem is. The real problem for me, the real problem for you, is when we stand in front of the mirror and we look and we see our reflection and we don't like who we are, and therefore we hope for their failure and for their demise. We would never ever verbalize it, but it's deep down inside. And if you ever want to know how evil this world is, then all you have to do is just listen to the conversation that you have in your head, and again, that you would never, ever share with anyone. Now, in the land of Ur, there's a complete opposite side. In the land of Ur, that you'll find that there's the side that I feel better than you, because again, in the land of Ur, I'm looking at you, and you are bigger, and you're slower, and you're shorter, and you're poorer, and you're nerdier than me, and therefore I feel good about myself. In fact, I feel superior when I'm with this group of people. You see, we can look to our right, and we're frustrated because we don't measure up, and we look to our left, and now we feel superior, and when you play this comparison game, it will produce one of two things. Either it will produce insecurity or it will produce arrogance in your life. And think about how wrong and how embarrassing and how dangerous this thought pattern is. Now, this goes back 2,000 years. This goes back to the time when Jesus was brought in for a trial, the trial for his life. And he's brought before a man whose name is Pilate, and Pilate examines him, interviews him, and he looks to those that bring him in, and he says, I find no fault in this man. This man, Jesus, has done absolutely nothing wrong, and yet the chief priest was demanding death. Now listen to what Pilate says in Mark 15:10. It says, "For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priest had delivered him up." That it was out of envy. And the envy was that they didn't like Jesus. It's the same spirit that's in me and the same spirit that is in you. This just kind of takes it a step further. Because what they were so mad about was that now Jesus was going up into the hillsides, and thousands of people were coming and gathering and listening to him, but now the teachers of the temple were sitting there with a handful of people. And they didn't like it, that Jesus was stealing all of their people and He was more popular than them, and they were tired of it, they were envious, and they wanted it stopped. And now, when Jesus is sentenced to death, and now when Jesus dies on the cross and they watch blood pour from His body and life go out of His body, you find that they rejoiced in His death. They rejoiced in His demise. Here's the definition of envy. Basically, it consists of pain and distress caused by another's success. Whoa! That's unbelievable. Did you hear what envy is? Envy is when somebody else succeeds beyond you. When someone is successful beyond your success, that we allow it to create a pain and a distress in our own lives. Poisonous. There's an old Indian fable that has been told for hundreds and hundreds of years. In fact, Native Americans still tell this story today. The story of two eagles. One eagle could fly much higher than the other eagle. As much as this eagle tried to get to the level of the other, he could never, ever climb that high, and he was frustrated by it. One day, the eagle that could not fly as high was down flying low, and he sees a hunter down below, and he flies down and lands close to the hunter. And he says, I would really like it if you could bring down that eagle up there. Well, the hunter pulls out an arrow, and he said, I would, but I don't have any feathers for my arrows. And the eagle said, I can help you with that. And he pulled out a few feathers and handed it to him. Now he had the feathers and the arrow, and he let them fly, and he kept firing and firing, but the eagle flew so high that the arrows could not reach him. And the eagle kept pulling out more and more and more as they try again, and kept pulling out more and more until he had pulled out so many feathers that now he could not fly at all. Now the hunter, realizing that he cannot bring down that bird, now turns and takes advantage of the situation and kills that bird. And the moral of the fable is that when you are envious of others, the one you will hurt the most is yourself. In Proverbs 14 and verse 30, Solomon made this statement. He said, "The tranquil heart gives life to the flesh, but envy makes the bones rot." Now, I want to spend some time in the writings of Solomon. If you want to turn with me, we'll spend several verses here in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 4, Solomon writes these words, and Solomon goes down as the wisest and the richest man that has ever lived. You'll also find that in history that there were kings and queens from all over the region would travel to where Solomon was to just sit at his feet and to draw from his wisdom. And now this morning we have the opportunity to pull something from Solomon. And this is what he says here in verse 4. "And I saw that all toil and all achievement," not some, but he's saying all toil, all work, all achievement springs from one man's envy of another. What he's saying here is that what drives mankind more than anything else is competition. That we're just trying to keep up with somebody else. It's when we constantly are looking to the right and looking to the left, and we're watching what everybody else is doing and what they're wearing, where they're shopping, where they're living, what they're driving, how much money they're making, and toil and achievement is driven by what others are doing. Now, this was a problem 3,000 years ago, and it's still a serious problem today. As we continue on in verse 4, this too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. You see what it is? It's keeping up with the Joneses. Now, if you're young enough, maybe you don't know that old phrase, and maybe for you it would be keeping up with the Kardashians. I mean, it's just trying to keep up with somebody. I mean, we're trying to look at somebody to see if we're okay. And I mean, am I measuring up? Do I really matter? And we look to everyone else. Now, when he writes this, is he being hypocritical here? Because you're talking about the richest man. I mean, he's got everything that life can offer. I mean, is he telling us not to work, not to try, just to fold our hands and sit back? In verse 5, he says, fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. What he's saying here is that ambition is a good thing. Ambition and drive and success and whatever you put your hands to, then do your best. I mean, Solomon is saying, hey, look at what I've done. I mean, look at my kingdom. Look at my palace. I mean, look at the gardens that I have built. Look at my gold. Look at my wealth. I'm talking about excellence at every level. But if you do nothing and you are lazy, then you will self-destruct. So Solomon, what are you really saying here? And here in verse 6, he says, better one handful with tranquility. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. This is an amazing image of what he's presenting for us. That as I have lived my life, I've come down to understand this. And this is the piece of wisdom that he's giving us. That you have got to live your life with incredible wisdom. And that you, as you are working and laboring and striving for success, which is all good things, he said, gather everything that you can possibly gather in one hand. In one hand. And live with tranquility. But what we have a tendency to do, because we're looking at everybody else, is that we're grabbing and we're straining and we're clawing and grabbing everything we can, and we're gathering, and we have two handfuls of things, and it's just not enough, and we wish we had one more hand that we can feel. But I want to tell you, it is never, ever, ever enough. We never get to the place that it's enough. And what he's saying here is gather everything that you can in one hand. But then, in this hand, value relationships. Value your husband. Value your wife. Value your children. Value happiness and enjoyment of life. Better one handful with tranquility. In verse 7, and again I saw something meaningless under the sun. Now he gives us a short illustration of a man that he knows. And he said, there was a man all alone. And he had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil. This guy's a workaholic. Yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? Have you ever gotten to that place where you work and you work and you work and you just think, God, there's just no fun in my life. I mean, there's no enjoyment in my life. All I'm doing is just working. And that's where he was. And he goes, this too is meaningless and a miserable business. In other words, no brother, no son, no one to leave his wealth, his inheritance to. He works and he works and he works and he's never content. No tranquility, no enjoyment. And doesn't it sound like so many of us here in this room today? That maybe you are married. I mean, you're living the American dream. You're married and you have kids and you have a house and you have a good job. And I mean, you have money, you have cars, you have things. And yet, when you walk in the evening, the home is in turmoil. There's bickering and fighting and complaining and tension and stress, and the teenagers are slamming the door, and there's just no rest in the house. And the reason why is because there's not a balancing of the toil and the value of relationships. And Solomon stops here and he asks a question. And he says, what's driving me? What is it? I mean, is it competition? Is it trying to stay up with everybody else in our neighborhood? I mean, why do I do what I do? Is it for recognition? I mean, do I so desperately need somebody patting me on the back, telling me how great I am because how good I am at my job? I mean, is it about status? Is it about money? Is it about collecting things? I just want to be a success. But what does success look like? Yeah, it's good to be a success, but what does it look like? What's the finish line? I mean, I want to do something great in life, and if I could just reach the pinnacle, and when you reach the pinnacle, it's no pinnacle at all. It just kind of leaves you hollow because from that pinnacle, there's another pinnacle. And it just goes on and on and on. And when does it stop? You see, we will become workaholics, struggling through life. And I mean, we just got to have this, and I got to work a little bit more and put another hour in. I've got to work this Saturday. And then we come down and we retire after 30 years in the company. On that last day, we take a little box and we gather all of our belongings in the office in this one little box, and we pick it up. And as we're walking out of the office, there is someone who also is carrying a box walking into your office. And they are younger, and they're better looking, and they're liked better than you by everybody else. And within one day, you are forgotten when you walk out. And now you look over your shoulder and you start thinking about that I just needed one more meeting. I needed to go out of town just one more time. I just need to make one more sell. I just need to put in a little more overtime. I just need to work one more night at home on this. And you miss out on your kids' ball games. And you miss out on the picnics and on the fishing trips. And when it comes to vacations, that I'm so buried at work that I can't leave. And if I leave, things will fall apart. And if I leave, then things will stack up. And I just can't get away. And maybe next year, or next year we'll go on a vacation. And year after year after year goes by. And this is exactly what Solomon said I learned in life. Stop groping with both hands and understand the balance that you toil and you labor and you gather as much as you can hold in this hand. But you have the wisdom of balancing it with what really matters in life. You know, we compare ourselves to other people more so than anyone ever in the history of mankind. We are obsessed with comparing ourselves. Now, if you're on social media, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because every day, what we're doing is that in our daily, mundane, boring lives, we go on Facebook, and there we're looking at the highlight reel of everybody else. And, you know, Instagram, they're taking these amazing pictures. And I mean, somebody could be sitting at Starbucks having the worst day of their life. And yet, they take on the table and they put their sandwich out there and their coffee cup just right. And they've got the lighting right. And there's a fireplace in the background. And they take that snapshot. And it looks like they are having the greatest day ever. And you wish, I want to be at Starbucks. Somebody else takes a picture. They have this steak and lobster all laid out on the table, and I'm at home eating my ramen noodles. Why can't I have their life? And we compare our lives to everybody else. And I want to tell you, it is the greatest deception that has ever taken place. Now I want to go to the New Testament, and I want to balance this. And very, very quickly, I want to go through this. A story that Jesus told. It's a parable. It's a made-up story. But it relates to us, and it shows us what happens at the end. Here in Matthew 25, the parable of the bags of gold. In verse 14, and again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Now that's a key line there. That he gave bags of gold in certain amounts according to their ability. Then he went on his journey. Now, he's talking about 3 different people with 3 different skill sets. And so, when I think about us in this room today, you know, there's the 5-bagger, there's the 2-bagger, there's the 1-bagger. Most of us would be in the category of the 2-bagger. You're a 2-bagger person. Because what that means is that there's a lot of people that have more than us, and there's a lot of people that have less than us. In verse 16, and the man who had received 5 bags of gold went out at once, put his money to work, and gained 5 bags more. Also, the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went out, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. And when he gets to this part of the story, everybody goes, everybody gasps, because they all know that that's not what you're to do. You're not to bury what has been given to you. In verse 19, after a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. Now, it says after a long time. When you go back to the Greek, that means after a lifetime. Doesn't mean that after a few months, after a few years, but at the end of their lives, after a whole lifetime, that the master comes back to settle the accounts. And it's a picture for us that what has been given to you by God, your talent, your giftings, your purpose, that one day that you will be held accountable by what God had given to you. In verse 20, the man who received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you have entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. Oh, he is proud to stand in front of the master. You gave me 5 and I've gained 5 back. Man, look what I have done. And you find in the next verse that the master says, well done. And the man in verse 22, the man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me. Now, there's that word again, entrusted. Both of these men are using this word. You entrusted me with. It's not like you gave me, but you entrusted me with this, that one day I realized that I will return that back to you. You entrusted me with 2 bags of gold, and I have gained 2 more. Verse 23, the master said, well done. In verse 24, then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, now listen to this. I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown. You gather where you have not scattered seed. Let me tell you, that is a harsh statement. He's accusing the master. So I was afraid, and I went out and I hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. Now, if you notice, he didn't say anything about God entrusting him with. Instead, here's a guy, the mentality of so many people today, and that his mentality is pointing the finger and saying, you know what, you are a hard master, you are an unfair master, and the reason that I have not succeeded is because of you, and it's what we do. God, it's your fault. It's where you put me, it's where you place me, it's all your fault. And then in verse 26, and the master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. Now the master is not mad because he did something immoral. The master is mad because he was given something of great value and he did nothing with it. He did not grow it. He did not expand it. He did nothing. In verse 30, and throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, the gnashing of teeth, what that is, it's a deep, deep anguish. It's this deep, deep regret and deep frustration that I threw my life away, that my life didn't count, that I never really did anything with my life. And what you find in this is that when we come to the end, there will be people, they will be gnashing their teeth, saying that now I understand what was given to me and I did nothing with it. And here's the key. Out of both of these writers, here's the key. Work hard. When you work hard. When you work, stay focused. When you work to be a success. When you work at the highest level of excellence that you possibly can. Work hard, but play hard. And that's the balance. Work hard, play hard. Work hard with tranquility. And you find that here that we begin to understand again that hard work and then what you value in life, my marriage, my kids, my relationship, what I value every day is that there is joy, there is happiness, there's fun in our lives. You know, in every success story that you hear, I love success stories. But I've never heard one start off like this. I've never heard a success story start off with someone saying, you know, I get up every morning and I get up whining and complaining and I'm mad at the world and I'm saying everything is unfair and God, you're unfair, and focused on everybody else and what they're doing and what I'm not doing. But when you think about success stories, it's when someone gets up in the morning, it's almost like they have blinders on. And they're not looking anywhere else, but just right here. And that they're focused on me, and they're focused on what has been given to me. They're focused on how that I can improve this gift, how that I can expand this gift. And that's what creates success. Oh, we're all tempted. All of us are tempted. All of us are the same to look around and say, but if only I had their looks, oh, I'd be successful too. If I had their money, or if I could sing like that, if I could speak publicly like that, I mean, if I had their intelligence, oh, you better believe I'd be a success like them. You know, it's real easy to play the blame game. You know, it's real easy to say, God, it's your fault. It's my parents' fault. It's society's fault. It's my nationality. It's because I grew up in poverty. Do you realize that those excuses don't work in the spiritual realm? Do you realize that no matter who you are and what you are, that when you connect to God at a supernatural level, that things begin to move and things begin to change beyond your power and beyond your ability. And it's why the Word of God says that nothing shall be impossible to you. Nothing shall be impossible. You know what we need to do is we need to learn. And just settle right now and saying, God, I want to get this thing right. And that we need to learn to celebrate what God has done and how God has gifted other people. Celebrate their advancements. Celebrate their success. And then when it comes down to where we are, that we learn to leverage what God has given us. Let me end by telling you this story. A couple of years ago, Joel and Victoria Osteen came to town. It was a big citywide crusade that they did, and many of you will remember that. Our church was very involved in that. And so our family was invited with a small group of people to go down to the Andalus Hotel downtown and to meet with Joel and Victoria. And it was a thrill for me. I mean, it was exciting to be able to sit and I mean, really just sit and talk and visit. And you just stand there. And when I met them, I thought, whoa, they are some of the most humble, nice people I've ever met in my life. It was a little bit later that Joel stood up in front of everyone and he said, let me just tell you a little bit about my story. And he started talking about when his dad died. And when he started telling this, tears just started streaming down his face. And he said, my dad got very, very sick and he went to the hospital and we didn't realize how sick he was. But he called me and he said, hey, Joel, he said, I'm not going to get out of the hospital in time for this weekend and I need you to preach for me this weekend. And Joel started around on the phone and he said, Dad, I've never preached. I don't know. I'm not a preacher. I can't do that. I mean, this is a big church. It's 6,000 people. And he's asking Joel to preach. Now, when Joel was a much younger man, when he was going to college, he was in his second year of college and he dropped out. And he didn't finish. He came home. And he said, Dad, I don't want a degree. I don't want to go to college. I just want to work here in the church with you. And he said, my passion is editing videos and where I can edit the videos and put them on television for you. That's what I want to do. And so that's what he did. And so he would go in a little small office, a little dark room, and where he was isolated from people, all by himself, and just working and working, hour after hour. And he did that for 17 long years, just in this little cave of an office. And now on this day, he says, son, I need you to preach. And so he took one of his dad's sermons and he tried to rewrite it and rework it. And he went out on stage that day and he preached for the first time. And it was clunky and it was not good. It was not smooth. And he got through it. And then the next week, his dad had a heart attack and died. And the leadership team of that church came to Joel and they said, Joel, you're it. You're it. He said, I can't even tell you how intimidated I was by that. Because Joel's dad was a fiery preacher, dynamic and on television every week. And now I've never preached in my life. And so he talked about how that he would go through all of his dad's sermons and he'd pick out one and he would preach that. He said that he would go into his dad's closet and he took out a pair of his shoes, and every Sunday when he preached, he would put those shoes on and he would step out on that stage, and he said somehow it was like it connected to me, to my father, and it was like the foundation of what he built, and I'm standing on that. And that went on, him preaching his dad's messages and preaching in his dad's shoes for several months, and things were not going well. And it was one day he said, I realized I'll never preach like my father, ever. He pushed all of those sermons to the side, and he took off his dad's shoes. The next week, he came out, and he said, I just got to be me. I just got to be who God created me to be. And he said, I started running my own race. And what a race he has run. Today, that church is over 40,000 people. Every single week, Joel is preaching to millions of people around the world. Every single day, his messages are going out. And at the end of every message, he looks into that camera and he invites people to know Jesus Christ. What I'm telling you is that you've got to run your race. Stop looking at everybody else. Stop looking at their success. Stop looking at how pretty they are. Stop looking at everybody else, because it will take you down the wrong path. I mean, it's futile. It's like chasing after the wind, and you'll never gain anything until you put the blinders on and you just say, I don't care what anybody else is doing. I just care about what God's called me to do. And here I go, and I'm going to run my race. Remember, when you run it, work hard. Work hard. Fill that one hand with everything that you can. And then value everything that brings peace and tranquility. What really, really matters. I'd like to ask everyone to stand. As you stand, I would like to pray over you and with you this morning. No accident that I'm here and no accident you're here. Today I want you to think hard and deeply about what Solomon has shared. I want you to bow your heads and I want to pray with you. And as we walk out of this place, let this message be the balance of your life. Change everything to be able to balance what really matters. Because what you don't want to do is come to the end of your race and look over your shoulder and have regrets. Father, I pray, Lord, over this amazing, amazing group of people. Father, I pray over people that I love with all of my heart. God, today I pray that you would honor my prayer as I pray over them. God, as I pray, Holy Spirit, come. Holy Spirit, move upon every person, upon every heart, and upon every mind. And God, I pray that there is a dynamic of wisdom that is flowing into our lives. In the book of James, you said, if any man, any woman lacks wisdom, all they have to do is ask. And Lord, I'm asking in the behalf of every person in this room, God, give us godly wisdom on how to live our lives, godly wisdom in how to live out our marriage, and godly wisdom how to raise our children. Father, I pray that most of all in our homes, that God, it's a home of tranquility. God, it's a home that where we find time for enjoyment and fun and rest and relaxation, that our homes are not filled with tension and stress. But Lord, our homes are filled with laughter. And God, I thank you, Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, come. Holy Spirit, come.